Today on The Truth About Cars, we're taking a look at the 2015 Infiniti Q50. Now the Q50 is an interesting vehicle because it's one of the best values in this segment. It has one of the highest horsepower figures in this segment. It's one of the only hybrid models in this segment. It's the only model in this segment where you can get an option where the steering wheel is not mechanically connected to the front wheels. Yes, you heard that right. This model has the direct adaptive steering package, which means it is steer-by-wire. There's a steering wheel, a steering position sensor, and then we have electric motors that basically steer the car for us. This means that the car can adjust the steering angle and the steering feel however it wants to, whenever it wants to. There are two important things to know about this. First off, there is a fail-safe mode where there is a clutch pack in there that will connect to allow the vehicle to steer mechanically if it needs to. And second, you can get a Q50 without this package. Although this replaces the Infiniti G sedan, the G sedan hasn't actually gone away. Instead, it's been rebadged the Infiniti Q40, which slots one notch below this. Now, I don't fully understand Infiniti's logic for doing this. However, you can see that Q40 model as the competition for the IS 250, the BMW 320i, which would be the lower horsepower version, as well as something like a Mercedes-Benz CLA or an Audi A3. By keeping that older model around as the Infiniti Q40, Infiniti has something to compete with that nearly $30,000 price point, while allowing this vehicle to start at about $37,000. Now, $37,000 is still a decent value over the V6 or higher horsepower competition. Although the Q50 starts $300 less than a BMW 328i, we get considerably more power under the hood because the base engine here is a 3.7-liter V6 producing 328 horsepower. If you want more than that, then the displacement actually drops down to 3.5 liters, and then Infiniti jams in a hybrid system, giving you 360 horsepower total and approximately 400 pound-feet of torque. Both engines use essentially the same transmission, sending power to the rear wheels or to all four wheels if you opt for the all-wheel drive system. Because this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, you can see that most of the engine is actually behind the front wheels. That is different than something like the Acura TLX, the Volvo S60, or even the Audi A4. Out back, the design on the Infiniti is fairly clean and luxurious. I'm seeing a little bit of Mazda 6 in these tail lamps, however. Now, although the Q50 is a little bit larger than most of the entries in this segment, the trunk is a little bit smaller than some of them. That means I can't fit quite as many roller bags like this in the cargo area. I can fit one right like that, shove it almost all the way back to the seats, but I can't do the same with a 26-inch roller bag. One nice touch, however, is that we still get a temporary spare tire in the back, and that's something that a lot of European vehicles are skipping these days. The steer-by-wire system may be very futuristic, but the interior of the Q50 is very traditional, and I think I actually like that because the Lexus IS interior is just a little bit too funky for me. The Cadillac ATS interior is interesting, but it's got a lot of shapes going on, and this looks very simplistic, very elegant, very restrained, but also very luxurious. We have a generous amount of wood trim going on in our particular model, nice two-color scheme going on as well. Somewhat like the latest Acuras, we have a two-screen infotainment setup, but the two screens work a little bit better with one another than the Acura setup. They're actually both touchscreens rather than having one fixed screen and one touchscreen like we get in the Acura. As we've seen from previous Infinitis, you can either touch the screen, and again that would be both screens, or we can use this knob over here on the steering wheel to actually interact with almost everything in the system from the steering wheel without taking your hands off. Or now we have an entirely different input method. We actually have a little control wheel down here like we started to see from everybody else in the market with a few extra buttons. All three of these input methods do essentially the same thing. It's up to you to decide which one you like. Of course, the downside for that is that we have some extra real estate taken up by these three input methods rather than just sticking with one. Although the front seats are very comfortable in the Q50, the passenger seat does not have the same range of motion as the driver's seat. The driver's seat does not have quite as many ways of motion as you'll find in some of the competition. Most notably, we're lacking four-way adjustable lumbar support, although we do have an extending thigh cushion, which is a handy feature. You should know that the tilt telescopic steering column is bundled in the same package as the memory seats and the direct adaptive steering. The Q50 gets some of the best paddle shifters on any modern vehicle. They are magnesium, they're also leather wrapped right on the edge, and they're attached to the steering column itself, not to the steering wheel. I'm told that race car drivers prefer them on the column, not on the wheel. Personally, I'm not a race driver, so I prefer them on the steering wheel, but I'm frequently told I'm wrong. The Q50 has one of the largest combined legroom figures in this segment, and that would be first row plus second row. It's really obvious in the back seat. Rather unfortunately, however, this sexy roofline does limit headroom, so if I actually sit upright in the rear seat, my head is touching the ceiling, and I can't actually sit in the middle seat without craning my head to one side. Out on the road, the Q50S is a little bit at odds with itself because this model does have the steer-by-wire system, but it's also the Q50S, which is the sporty model. So we get the sport brakes, the excellent magnesium paddle shifters on the back of the steering column, the absolutely excellent rev matching and throttle blipping when we downshift the vehicle, and very good handling around corners as well. But the feel is a little bit peculiar with the direct adaptive steering system. It feels a little bit video game-ish. I have the system adjusted to the heaviest and most direct steering ratio, so the steering is pretty quick and it is moderately heavy. It doesn't really get rock heavy, but it is fairly heavy as far as modern cars go. We can also put it in a casual mode, which makes it impossibly light and also really broadens that steering ratio out, so it does feel a little bit boaty in that mode. In fact, the steering changes so much that initially I thought this also had an adaptive suspension system until I really checked that spec list and noticed that it didn't have one. That's because in the casual mode, it really feels a little bit disconnected. It feels like all of a sudden the suspension has gotten softer up front because the turn-in is kind of slow. In terms of acceleration, the Infiniti really leads the pack in terms of base models. This goes from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds flat. The reason I mention base models is because this can be seen as competition for the BMW 328i, which is significantly slower out on the road, the Volvo S60 T5, the Lexus IS250, etc., and you will get much better performance out of this than any of those other entry-level options. In fact, really only the BMW 335i will be faster than this. But then, of course, we have the hybrid model, which is actually about 1/10 of a second faster than the 335i. The S model also brings with it improved brakes and a stiffer suspension. Now, the stiffer suspension feels like a very good balance. I don't really mind this because it's not really that hard, so it's not really bruising my kidneys in these seats. It feels like a very good balance between sport and comfort. In terms of absolute handling, the Q50 with the direct adaptive steering does very well for itself, but the feel is a little bit unusual. Part of that's the steering itself, but part of that is also the fact that we also get electronic trace control, which is what Infiniti calls it in this vehicle. And that means the vehicle will actually brake wheels on one side of the car or the other to help us go through that corner a little bit more directly. So we don't get the same kind of feel out on the road that you're used to in a rear-wheel drive car. Of course, that can be disabled, but we cannot disable the direct adaptive steering. You either get it on the car or you don't. The direct adaptive steering can basically be set in 4 different ways. There are 3 steering ratios and 3 steering weights, and they can be combined in 4 different ways. The comfort mode is impossibly soft, and the quickest mode is just a hair faster than I would like. Infiniti has long been thought of as sort of the Japanese BMW, while Lexus was trying to be the Japanese Mercedes-Benz, and that really continues with this generation of the Infiniti. You can think of this as sort of an electronic twist on the ultimate driving machine, because Infiniti is trying to improve handling as well as the speed around corners by digitizing everything. Now, very much like BMW, Infiniti is also trying to add a little bit of added luxury and convenience into this system, and that's part of the reason for the steer-by-wire system in general. Because this steer-by-wire system can attempt to compensate for crosswinds, groove pavement, that sort of thing, things that are trying to blow the vehicle off its intended direction while the steering wheel is going straight, and that can result in kind of a peculiar feeling. Cadillac's ATS is by far the most direct option in this segment. It feels much more sorted, much more connected to the driver than the Q50, even without the direct adaptive steering package. Now, if you don't get the direct adaptive steering in this vehicle, I would say it handles very much like the BMW 3 Series. It feels very much like it out on the road. The 3 Series has become a little bit softer, a little bit less direct in this latest version, and I would say that they feel very similar. That would be one notch below the Cadillac ATS or the Lexus IS. Value has long been one of the major reasons to buy an Infiniti over the European competition, and that continues with this generation. The Q50 starts at $37,150, $38,900 if you want all-wheel drive. That's about $300 less than the BMW 328i, even though we get notably more power under the hood. If you want the hybrid model, that will set you back $44,100, $46,200 if you want all-wheel drive. That's only about $600 more than a BMW 335i. Performance in the regular Q50 is only a hair behind the 335i, but if you get the hybrid model, it's definitely a notch above the 335i. The Q50S is the sport model, and it's available in either the hybrid or the regular engine that we've been taking a look at here. It starts at $43,650 by default in rear-wheel drive trim, adds the sport brakes, sport seats, sport suspension, and the paddle shifters on the steering column. The big thing to know about the steer-by-wire system is that it's not a standard feature on the Q50, so you can avoid it. However, the same package that includes the steer-by-wire system also includes niceties like the power tilt telescopic steering column, the memory seats, the auto-dimming mirrors on the outside, and the all-around camera system, and those are options that I would definitely like on my luxury vehicle. Now, the tricky thing with the Q50 is that the model we've been taking a look at here has all the options, including that direct adaptive steering package. Now, the direct adaptive steering is very polarizing because it does not feel like a traditional steering rack. It definitely feels a little bit video game-ish, a little bit different than your average vehicle. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that although the feel is very different, it actually does help improve cornering because you can go around corners faster and a little bit more confidently in this vehicle than in the 335i. It's just that it doesn't feel quite the same. It doesn't feel quite as natural as basically every other vehicle in this segment. And in terms of actual steering feel, I would rank this below entries like the Volvo S60 or the Acura TLX. It is kind of a tricky decision, but I think my favorite entry in this segment would be the fully loaded rear-wheel drive Q50S hybrid, even with the steer-by-wire system, because I want all those other features that are bundled with the steer-by-wire, even though I'm not a huge fan of the steer-by-wire system itself. Now, I am told that there may be an option to remove the steer-by-wire system from those packages in the future, but at this time, you are forced to get it if you do want the extra features that are in that package. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes with The Truth About Cars. This has been the 2015 Infiniti Q50S. Be sure and check out thetruthaboutcars.com for news, reviews, and of course, the complete review on the 2015 Q50S. I'll see you next week.